Hello, everyone. Welcome to Buddha's Center. Very exciting. Hey, everybody on all the other applications, welcome to Buddha's Center. Very exciting tonight. Once again, we are looking at Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection, and specifically the section on Bodhicitta. And as we know, that Bodhicitta is the entrance into the Mahayana. Shantideva calls it the gold-making elixir that turns everything that we do into a cause for Buddhahood. And it's just so amazing that we're learning how to generate this incredible mind in a complete way without leaving out any details. And I think that, anybody who's following this you start to really get the feeling that this is all possible, right? Based on all of these steps that are being presented, I can actually generate this mind that aspires to enlightenment. And based on the reasoning, I can see why I would want to do so. So before we get into the teaching on Bodhicitta, we're just so fortunate to have these teachings Khentsur Geshe Wandak gave to us. I was on the phone this morning with Umzala Geshe Aga, just clarifying a point, just to make sure I knew where the source was of a specific quote that I found in Panchen Sonandrapa's text that I wasn't sure of. So yeah, we've got some new information tonight to work with, and I'm going to take a couple of, just to let people who've been doing this, we always start with kind of a guided meditation. I'm going to insert an actual, you'll see, a sutra to support some of the guided meditation, just so that we always have some fresh perspective and some supporting material to show us, where all of this is coming from and how we can, say this is an authentic teaching and this is something that the Buddha said was necessary for us to understand from an analytical perspective in order to realize it, in a direct way. We had to arrive at this stuff through analysis, even emptiness, through analysis and understanding, and arrive at inference, kind of an inferential valid cognition, a correct understanding of this stuff that's incontrovertible, that won't change, that would then be able to, from that analysis and that kind of conceptuality, transformed into a non-conceptual direct experience. And what we're trying to have the direct experience of is the ultimate bodhicitta, right? The direct perception of emptiness. And we'll talk about how that's ultimate bodhicitta, and we'll talk about how, realizing the objective clear light from the subjective side is the aim that we're getting at. And eventually we want to be able to have the realization where the subjective clear light and the objective clear light can kind of become one taste in our minds. So we're able to kind of make that union take place. And the only way that union takes place is by understanding, what the, an object's objective existence is, knowing that it's the emptiness of objectivity is the object's objective existence, right? And then we have to understand that it has conventional subjective existence and so forth. So there's a lot to understand, but let's, before we speak too much on the lot to understand stuff, let's set a proper motivation so it can saturate our minds, so that we really, really know that we're in a mental place where we can bring this information in, and we're not going to forget it, or we didn't come in here with kind of a polluted mind that kind of dirties up all of the information that we're hearing, or distracted where we're going to not hear any of it at all. So let's try to set a motivation. Let's get into what's called the 7-point Bhairacana posture. We've gone over this so many times. I won't go into too much detail about it, but we'll put our legs into a cross-legged fashion, preferably the Vajra or lotus posture, but we do whatever we can within our physical limitations. Cross-legged, just regular old cross-legged, or feet on the floor is totally appropriate if that's all you can do. Put your right hand on your left with your thumbs touching, making kind of a diamond pattern, and put it into your lap in a comfortable fashion. Make your back straight like a stack of coins, it says. Your vertebrae should be very, very straight. We have a tendency as Westerners to think straight is arched, and we have to break that habit. We have to really, really start to think about what it would look like if there was, a straight line going right down to where we're sitting. What would that vertebrae look like? How straight would that vertebrae be? So we have our vertebrae like a stack of coins. And number 4, we're putting our shoulders into a comfortable position that allows for, while we have our hands in a lap, to kind of make a bow with our arms, but leaving comfortable, so it sits like that in a comfortable way. Then we put our head slightly forward, eyes slightly open at a 45-degree angle, focused at the tip of our nose, and our mouth in a comfortable position with our tongue against the teeth. And this allows for the saliva to flow appropriately, and by breathing through our nose, it makes it so our mouth won't dry out. All of these positions just mentioned are for the purpose of being able to sit for longer periods of time, have mental clarity, align all of the channels and winds and so forth, make sure that the blood flows in a great way. So it gives us the most excellent opportunity to have realizations in this sitting posture. So we have these 7 points. And we have our eyes focused at the tip of our nose, but eventually that's all going to disappear because our meditation is being done with our mental consciousness. We aren't employing our physical kind of sense consciousness at the end of the day. We're really trying to make all of the work that we're doing being done in our mental consciousness. All the objects of observation that we're looking at with the actual mental consciousness. So we're getting ourselves into a position that's the most suitable position at the beginning stages to be able to increase our stability more and more and more. And even in the final stages, when it's really important that all of our channels and winds and so forth are aligned in the exact proper way so that we can, develop some of the higher realizations and the pliancies and so forth. So we get into this position. And now we're going to, in this position, begin to breathe in and out through our nose. So we breathe all the way in, filling the lungs, filling the diaphragm all the way. So you feel your diaphragm extending. So this is the kind of deep breath that you're taking. So you're breathing in through your nose all the way to the top in a very even fashion. We're not breathing in really quickly. We're not breathing in so slowly. We feel like we're drowning. We're just doing it in a very even fashion. When people begin to meditate, a lot of times we feel like we have to take these very quick breaths, right? Because we're filling our lungs. We're not used to breathing in a complete way and then exhaling in a complete way. It's something we actually have to train ourselves in some ways to do. So we breathe in through our nose, filling our diaphragm all of the way. And then we exhale and we say 1. So we're counting. So right now, what we're trying to do is get rid of any distractions, get rid of anything that isn't breathing in and out. So we come in here with, attachments to certain things that we want, that we think we need, and we're obsessed with, and we have anger at things that happened and people and so forth. So what we're trying to do is get our mind to a more neutral place from which we can grow virtue, from which we can actually be reasonable and hear things. So we're breathing in and out, and we're exhaling, and we're counting 1. And we'll begin by doing this and getting kind of to a neutral place. And then we'll add the image of a Lord Buddha, who you see now actually behind me. Anybody who's new to this, who doesn't know what the image of Buddha Shakyamuni is, but I'll guide that. So right now, just breathing in and breathing out and focusing only on that. If you find your mind straying, if you're kind of introspection, the spine, your mind sees that you've lost your mindfulness, you've lost the object of observation that you weren't supposed to forget, bring it back to the breath. Just so right now we're going to just focus slowly on the breathing in and out and the counting. And the counting is just reminding us, ding, yes, we're focused on the breath. 2, we're focused on the breath. Now, as you're breathing in and out, add an image in your mind. Think about Lord Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni, about 2 feet in front of you. Continue breathing in and out, counting. Eye height, about 1.5 inches or 2 tall, about the size of your thumb. Focusing on the breath in and out. And now telling your mind, focus on the image of Lord Buddha. 3-dimensional, beautiful, radiant, golden, light body, not a body full of blood and bones. A real being who's transcended all of the contaminated aggregates. Visualize that being in front of you as you're breathing in and out. Mind should be full of joy. We're telling it to do what we want it to do. Usually it runs all over the place. And we're telling it to focus on the most amazing being in the universe, this amazing being that we will become. Think about these excellent qualities of body, speech, and mind, and enlightened activities of this Buddha that we're focusing on. Think about why we came to a class on Buddhism. What pain brought us here? What dissatisfaction brought us here? What questions brought us here? And we start to think about what the Buddha had for us. What did the Buddha answer? So the Buddha first taught impermanence. The Buddha said that we understand the course impermanence. We understand that years end. We understand that trees, leaves fall. We understand that things break. But there's another subtle level of impermanence that we have to understand. And every almost second, there's 65 moments, and we're moving so quickly towards various types of circumstances. So now we'll read from the Sutra on Impermanence by Lord Buddha. The Sutra on Impermanence. Homage to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling in Athatanapandika Park in the Jataka Grove in Shravasti. Along with a large monastic assembly, the Bhagavan addressed the monks as follows. Monks, 4 things are appealing, singled out, considered valuable, pleasant, and highly appreciated by everyone. What are those 4? Monks, good health is appealing, singled out, considered valuable, pleasant, and highly appreciated by everyone. Good health, however, ends with sickness. Monks, sickness is neither appealing nor is singled out, considered valuable, pleasant, or highly appreciated by anyone. Monks, youth is appealing, singled out, considered valuable, pleasant, and highly appreciated by everyone. Youth, however, ends with aging of the body. Monks, the aging of the body is neither appealing, nor is it singled out, considered valuable, pleasant, or highly appreciated by anyone. Monks, prosperity is appealing, singled out, considered valuable, pleasant, and highly appreciated by everyone. Prosperity, however, ends with its decline. Monks, the decline of prosperity is neither appealing, nor is it singled out, nor considered valuable, pleasant, or highly appreciated by anyone. Monks, life is appealing, singled out, considered valuable, pleasant, and highly appreciated by everyone. Life, however, ends in death. Monks, death is neither appealing, nor is it singled out, considered valuable, pleasant, or highly appreciated by anyone. Thus spoke the Bhagavan, the Sugata, and having spoken, the teacher added these words. Good health is impermanent, youth does not last. Prosperity is impermanent, and life too does not last. How can beings afflicted as they are by impermanence take delight in desirable things like these? When the Bhagavan had thus spoken, the monks rejoiced and praised his words. This completes the Sutra on Impermanence. So now we look at this first noble truth, the superior truth of suffering. We see that the Buddha said that we need a very, very personal understanding about this suffering, that we're moving very quickly, 65 moments a second, towards birth, aging, sickness, and death, meeting with unpleasant things and being separated from pleasant things, and having this suffering that has to occur over and over and over again, where we don't get what we want, and we have these aggregates that are physically and mentally painful at times. So we have this physical basis and mental basis forced on us. It's a basis from which we have suffering. And the Buddha said we're always moving very quickly towards all of these states. We can't imagine how quickly it's happening. And we see, oh, now we've gotten old all of a sudden, but we were old, getting older the minute that we were born, the minute we were conceived, we were moving towards death. And the Buddha said that we have to understand the subtle impermanence that's always going on, that all compound things have this impermanent state and are always in a constant state of flux. And our state of flux within cyclic existence is moving through all of these sufferings over and over and over and over and over again. And the Buddha talked about the 6 types of suffering, the uncertainty of cyclic existence, that in our previous lives, these loved ones that we care about so dearly, we might have killed. We might have had horrible relationships with them because of our karma and their karma at that time. And these people we call enemies in this life, we might have had incredible relationships with. They might have taken care of us when we were so vulnerable, but we just can't see that because we've forgotten, because our view is so limited, because of our karma. And because of our afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience, we can't see these relationships that we've had since beginningless time with everyone. And we just cling to this kind of time right now as if it's certain, but it's always changing. And the person that I love the most, I may never know again until I'm a Buddha. The person I may love the most may become my enemy or my dog in my next life. I need to understand that these relationships are constantly changing, and there's no certainty in this realm of cyclic existence and rebirth and reincarnation. We couldn't think there's certainty. We know if we think, oh, we'll all be together, if we believe in reincarnation, we know we don't all die at the same time. And there would be an infinite regression if our grandmother's grandmother's grandmother was all waiting for their grandkids and for their children. So we have to see that there's all these varying relationships and uncertainty, that when we die, we will be propelled into a new uncertainty, and it will become our own, and we'll have a sense of certainty. But the Buddha told us there isn't this certainty, and that we shouldn't feel certain about anything because of this reincarnation, because we're going to be born again and again and again and have relationships with everyone and every kind of relationship with everyone. And then you won't be satisfied, the Buddha said, in any of these situations. It will be like drinking salt water. You'll have everything you need, and you'll have all these incredible things around you, but you'll be just so dissatisfied. It'll be like drinking salt water. And this is the real sickness, that we aren't satisfied. We have these rebirths, we have these bodies that we have over and over again that we cling to and we think are so substantial and we think are ours. And we can't even find the body we think is ours when we look at subtle impermanence, because it's always changing. It's always aging. It's always moving closer to death. It's always getting closer to the next sickness. So we can't even find this body that we're looking for, that we're seeking out and we believe is so grand and so dear. We see it's just constantly changing. And then we have to then shuck it off and take on another rebirth and another rebirth and another rebirth and go the high realms and the lower realms. And we know that even if we reach the peak of existence, like Acharya Udraka, Buddha Shakyamuni's last teacher, had the highest samadhi in cyclic existence, the peak of existence. We knew that even at that highest realm, Buddha knew that he wasn't free from suffering. Buddha knew that even though he had the highest realization in the world before Buddha did and became the reliable guide, that this teacher had the realization of the peak level of cyclic existence and was his final teacher, who thought he was enlightened. And Buddha knew he was still in cyclic existence because he was in the formless realm, peak of existence meditation. And Buddha's previous teacher was in the state of vacuity, the second highest level of cyclic existence. And Buddha kept being dissatisfied because he knew that all of these beings were in samsara and had to descend to the high and descend to the low. So the Buddha sought something more out and told us that there is more than you could ever imagine. You can have complete freedom from suffering and complete bliss if you want that. You don't have to shut these bodies off and go the high to the low. You don't have to be all alone in this process. You are going through this process and you think you have this certainty of your companions, and at the time of death everyone's standing around you, but the only one who experiences the separation of your lifespan is you. It's your consciousness, it's the being that will be propelled into an intermediate state and then propelled into your next life, and by your throwing and completing karma. And you alone will have to experience that. And then you will cling to new beings and think that they are your only friends and only loved ones, when all beings really should have that relationships with you in your mind, if you look at it in a more realistic way. So we have all of these types of suffering, and the Buddha said we can classify them according to the suffering, which is the kind of mundane pain and suffering mentally and physically experience, and the suffering of change, which is this thing that's happening so quickly within all of the forms of happiness that we think, that they erupt into a form of suffering. This subtle impermanence is always happening in everything that we think will make us happy, and it will eventually turn into what's called the suffering of change. We'll walk into a hot room when we're cold, we'll warm up and we'll be too hot. We'll have a car that we think is the most amazing car in the world. It will break and will become a piece of junk and a source of our suffering. So anything that we can think of in cyclic existence will eventually turn into a form of suffering. We will have to be separated from our children, from our parents, from our loved ones. All of these things that bring us so much joy and happiness will eventually become a form of suffering, and we'll have to separate from them. So we have to look at the happiness within cyclic existence as bait that keeps us thinking that everything's okay, and we don't do anything about our predicament. And the pervasive compounded suffering is the thing that is really the basis of this first noble truth. The beautiful thing that the Buddha taught us, that we were having this momentary nature, and we were forced again and again and again into a set of contaminated aggregates, into a set of suffering aggregates, body and mind, a suffering body and mind. So these are what the aggregates make up, the body and the mind. We'd be forced again and again and again into a suffering set of aggregates. We wouldn't have control over it, and it would be happening because of our ignorance. So the Buddha stated that, so first the superior truth of suffering, and then said the superior truth of origin, how your suffering comes about, how that result occurs, is by ignorance. The Buddha said that all results are dependent upon the cause, and this particular result of suffering is dependent upon the cause at its root of ignorance. And from ignorance, we have an inappropriate attention, and then afflictions happen, attachment, hatred, ignorance happens, and then we act. We act in contaminated ways, non-virtuously through our body, speech, and mind, and then even virtuously with ignorance mixed in, causes more cyclic existence, causes more samsara. And that's why it's so important for us to have an understanding of the view and so forth when we're engaging in virtue, because virtue can cause cyclic existence as well. So we have to be very careful and understand that the kind of happiness we're looking for is non-samsara happiness, is non-contaminated happiness. So what does that mean? So if we have ignorance, it means we're going to have suffering. This is what causes it. And the Buddha said that here's the good news, that we can end all of our suffering. The suffering doesn't have to occur. Suffering can cease, because suffering is a result. You just take the cause out, and then there's a negative state. There's no more suffering, right? Suffering becomes an absence by taking it away. What causes it? It just doesn't occur. So it can't occur again. If there's a cause is missing, always it can occur again. So the Buddha said this can cease. The suffering can cease in the third noble truth, and then said this is how in the fourth noble truth. This is the superior path. This is how Arya beings, superior beings who've seen emptiness directly, got rid of ignorance. This is how I got rid of ignorance, and how I've achieved fearlessness of freedom from suffering. And stated in a very logical way, based on cause and effect, that we didn't have to think like something magical would occur. We didn't have to think that there was some other powered nature that could transform this suffering state into happiness. We see that we have the control is within our hands. We can then do the things necessary to get rid of the ignorance in order to be free from suffering altogether. And then the Buddha said that there's another part you must understand, that if you only remove these afflictive obstructions through abandoning ignorance, so what gets removed is called an afflictive obstruction, you will not have fulfilled all of your own needs. You'll have a freedom from suffering altogether. You'll be in an abiding nirvana. I have a here and solitary realizer vehicle that'll do that, but that's an incomplete path. The only way you can have complete bliss and complete power and have all the excellent qualities that the Buddha has, requires you to engage in a path. And then the Buddha tells us that that path is the path that cherishes others. That path is a path of love and compassion. And by engaging in a path of love and compassion towards everyone without exception, we would be able to have his state of Buddhahood, where there were no things that were left out. There was a state of complete omniscience and a freedom from not only the afflictive obstructions that keep you from being, that keep you in suffering, but also a freedom from the obstructions to omniscience that keep you from being omniscient and keep you from being Buddha, keep you from having immense bliss and complete freedom from suffering. So the Buddha said that this is the technique you have to engage in order to realize this beautiful mind. And the Buddha said, like yourself, now you've meditated so clearly on your own sufferings. You understand you have this subtle impermanence. You're moving through suffering, suffering after suffering after suffering. And it's happening so fast. Sometimes you don't even notice it and you think you're happy. And then you're suffering again and don't know why. The Buddha said, like you, everyone has that. You're start with your neutrals and then think about your friends and enemies. See how your different reactions are to these different people right now in your mind. Think about a neutral person, a stranger, and then think about someone you love and you see you draw towards them, and then think about someone you don't like, you find your mind push away. And the Buddha said that before we can have any kind of realizations that'll make you a Buddha, you have to develop what's called equanimity. You have to develop this realization that there's this equality between friends, enemies, and neutrals. You start with your neutrals beings, and then move to your friends, and then move to your enemies, and you start to get an equal kind of ability to want to benefit all three types of beings by seeing since beginningless time, you've had every single relationship with all of these types of beings. In previous lives, your friends were your enemies. In previous lives, strangers were your closest dear ones. In future lives, you might have all of these different relationships. But really, we're looking at previous lives and recognizing that every single relationship that we can have that we label as friends, enemy, or neutral isn't certain, like we thought about when we did the meditation on the uncertainty of cyclic existence. So we see that uncertainty, and we see that just it wouldn't make sense not to want to help any one of those types of beings because we've had every relationship with every one of those types of beings. So we have an equal kind of open-mindedness about helping any among those types of beings. And then we recognize that every one of them has been our mother. We recognize that every one of them has been our father, has been our dearest loved one. Think about the person in your life who took care of you when you were the most vulnerable. No one else knew you. No one else cared. Who is that person? You know, whoever that person is, you know, whenever that was in your life, think of that person. And every single sentient being has been that kind to you, has been willing to take care of you in your most vulnerable state. And you start to recognize that you've embodied all of these different forms, and other beings have embodied all of these different forms, and you've had these really intimate connections with everyone. So you start to think about that, and you think about how kind they were. Think about how kind these people were to you when you were so vulnerable. And you think, oh, I wish I could repay their kindness. And I wish I could make them happy. And because you've meditated on the suffering of change, you know that just giving them a cupcake is actually giving them suffering in some ways. Of course, you give them a cupcake, right? But giving them a cupcake isn't an ultimate way to help them. This isn't a way to pay back the kindness that they've shown you, because of the fact that all happiness within cyclic existence is actually a form of suffering. So you would think, man, I wish I could give them more than I really can. And you leave it at that. And then you start to see the equality of yourself and others in terms of importance. You recognize that every single being wants happiness. Every single being wants to be free from suffering. You think about the pain that you will experience in the future with birth, aging, sickness, and death, etc., and that you have experienced with it. You think about that most painful moment, and then you think every single being has that same exact painful moment and doesn't want it. Every single sentient being, when they're happy, feels happy like me, right? They have that same experience, that same emotion takes place. And why would I begrudge that? They have that same kind of feeling. Every single sentient being has the same potential to be a Buddha in this life as me. If they become a Buddha before me, their sole aim will be to help me. So they're equally as important as I am. And when we look at it from the perspective of dependent origination, where is self? I say this is myself, but I can only label myself and dependent upon other. And other only labels me as other, dependent upon, can only label that, other can only label them as self, in dependence upon seeing me as other. So there is no inherently existent self or other. There's this dependent origination between you and me taking place that makes me put a line between the two of us. And it's not even a line that makes sense from an ultimate perspective, because we both have the same emptiness of objective existence. Our nature is exactly the same in terms of emptiness, and our nature of mind is the same in that it can be proliferated and turned into a Buddha. So we're all equally important. We think about how when we cherish ourselves, good things don't really come out of it. When we're so selfish, we make all these plans and we try to step on the heads of others, and it only leads to our suffering, has always only led to our suffering in lifetime after lifetime. Cherishing others has always led to our happiness. The chronic disease of self-cherishing, as it says in the Guru Puja, has always brought us suffering. The incredible qualities of cherishing others have always brought us happiness, according to Shantideva. We see His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all these incredible beings, and what makes them so attractive is this idea that they cherish others. Jesus Christ cherished others. We see all of these wonderful beings throughout history. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, what was so special? Why were these people so drawn to them? Thomas Merton, because they cherished others. They had this love in their heart. So we can see the difference between ourselves and those kinds of beings. So we see that we want to really cherish others, and that it's a good thing. And then we begin to think about taking on others' suffering and giving them happiness in the way of a giving and taking practice. We think it's, oh, wow, how nice it would be if I could take on their suffering, and give them all of my root happiness. May they have happiness and the causes of happiness. I'll take it upon myself to bring them to a state of happiness and a freedom from suffering. And we begin to think along these lines as we're trying to think about if we could only take on their suffering and give them our infinite happiness, because we see the wonderful nature of cherishing others, and we see the excellent qualities of cherishing others. So we're thinking in these lines of, oh, how nice it would be. We wish they could be free from suffering. We'll make it happen. I want them to have happiness. I'll make that happen. And then we actually say, I'm going to now switch my attitude. I'm going to put your needs before my own. I'm going to always interact with you in a way where I'm thinking of how you would like me to respond, how I could fulfill your needs. And I do this kind of switch in my mentality. So now we're moving towards what the Buddha said we needed to move towards in order to actually become Buddhas. So we're seeing that we have this switch. And then we start to meditate on the incredible kindness that sentient beings show us, that all of the wonderful things that we have in our life, all of our blankets and our house and the wood that makes our house, and everything is dependent upon other beings. The food that we eat is dependent upon beings who aren't alive, who right now, right? And they're in another rebirth. The last crop seed is from a previous crop. Who was the farmer that planted the seed that allowed for me to eat today? So we start to see the interdependence that we have with everyone. And then we say, I must take on myself the task of freeing them all. I must do this. I must bring them to a state of happiness and a freedom from suffering. And that's where we recognize that we can't. We recognize that we're in a state of cyclic existence. We're in a state of suffering. It would be like laying on a ground after our bones had all been broken, next to our best friend whose bones had all been broken, and saying, whispering in their ear, I'll help you get up. When there's someone in the other room we could just yell for that would actually be capable of helping us stand. So I don't have the ability to free all sentient beings from suffering. I don't have the ability to even know where all of those sentient beings are. I don't have the ability to even count all of those sentient beings. I have the suffering of change. I have pervasive compounded suffering. I have the suffering of suffering. I have all of those things like they have. I'm like the person laying on the ground with all my bones broken that can't help anyone up. I must become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So then we arrive at this beautiful mind that the Buddha said is the entrance to the Mahayana, this beautiful mind that we're learning how to get in this class every Thursday night, this beautiful mind that says, may I become Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. May I become Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I must become a Buddha because the only way I can fulfill all of my own needs is by becoming a Buddha. The only way I can fulfill all sentient beings' needs is by becoming a Buddha. May I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we have this intention very, very ripe in our mind. We're thinking, now we're about to recite the Heart Sutra. May I recite this Heart Sutra? Think about its meaning, to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Everything that, may I listen to this teaching to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we set this in our mind and we saturate our mind with this. And when we get up from this class, we leave and we start to think all of our actions that we're engaging in, we're doing to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And we're looking at, how those actions are in relation to ethical behavior in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So from this realization, from this meditation that we just went through, where we develop this desire to definitely emerge from suffering for ourselves, and a desire to then become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, from this beautiful mind to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, let's then recite the Heart Sutra. So with this motivation, with this mind, this mind generation that wishes to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, imagine that all the gurus and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are in the space in front of you. Imagine that Khyentse Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, all the holy beings, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Dema Locho Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Thich Nhat Hanh, any holy beings that you imagine in the space in front of you, whoever you consider a holy being, and imagine that they're all so happy that you're here today and engaging in what will cause you to become, the practices that will cause you to become a Buddha, engaging in the wisdom arisen from hearing, the wisdom arisen from analysis and meditation. Imagine all the gurus and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are so happy at this moment. They're so pleased. Now imagine that you emanate infinite arms and stretch them everywhere. Numbers of arms you can't even imagine. Go out and grab the hands of all sentient beings, and the hell hungry goes to animal, human, demigods, and gods realms, grabbing all of them, grabbing every single sentient being without bias. Bias left in our meditation we just did. We have no bias. We have an equal desire to help every single sentient being without bias. We've brought them all here. Now the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas erupt with bliss. Now they're so happy. Khyentse Geshe Wandak is smiling and so happy. The teachings are going on. And now all these gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas care about is occurring. All sentient beings are assembled in one place doing exactly what it takes to become Buddhas. The gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas have one goal, and that is to figure out how each individual can become a Buddha as quick as possible. And the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas see that everyone's doing it, and bliss just goes over the entire merit field. You can feel almost a warmth of the bliss happening. Now imagine that you and all sentient beings around you have a white Om on your crown, a red Ah at your throat, and a blue Hum at your heart. So all the sentient beings you've gathered that you're leading all have the same thing you do: a white Om, a red Ah, blue Hum. And this signifies your body, speech, and mind. Now imagine from the bliss from the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, light rays start to emanate. White light rays start to radiate and emanate nectars and then turn into seed syllable Om, almost like snow is coming down. And seed syllable Oms go into the Om at our crown and all sentient beings' crown, and imagine that it purifies all negativities of our body and all sentient beings' negativities of our body. Imagine that red light rays and nectars from the bliss of all the gurus and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas transform into red Ahs and dissolve into the throats, our throats, and all the throats of all sentient beings, purifying negativities of the speech. And then imagine blue light rays and nectars transform into blue Hums and go to the heart of our and all sentient beings' heart and purify our minds. You imagine this is like a blizzard of Om, Ah, Hum, white, red, blue, respectively, and all of these are blizzarding down and raining down on us and all sentient beings and purifying our body, speech, and mind. And this is all coming from the bliss and the rejoicing that the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are partaking in because we're all here. So just imagine this, and Khyentse Geshe Wandak and His Holiness. And now we'll recite the Heart Sutra, and imagining that all sentient beings are reciting the Heart Sutra with us. We're leading them in this prayer and so forth. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice a profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas. No I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. Deyata om gate gate bharagade parazangadi bodhisattva om gade gade bharagade Bharazangadi 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 bodhisattva. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Agazamarate Janara Zamara Vedi Adangati Kati Paragati Parasangati Buddhizoa Baba Concha Sanjika Edemitoji Lobodoji Melbodoji Shiwadoji Ragibaji Metavishi Danji Shetin Korea Zoa Angirin Donjaji Shiwa Damitunu Vejandandawada Tumba Dunjin Bonzon Zonjoji Dachi De Jandenda Delejo. Make a mandala offering a perfect universe to the teacher, all the way back to the lineage of all the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas that have passed this beautiful, beautiful lineage now. Fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers. adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. Yeah, zo lama da ba ye na ye je je ga la yen ze jun zen je je da zam be du je ze ma la za je ju ji ja ba ba du zo. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Gam Niradayami. Zanye Jadanda Janala. Chanju Badu Danye Jazuji. Dagi Jisheji Bezonanji. Drula Benji Zanye Jubajo. Zanye Jadanda Janala. Chanju Badu Danye Jazuji, Dagi Jiji Bezananji, Drula Benji Sanje Jubajo, Sanje Jadana Janala, Chanju Badu Danye Jazuji, Dagi Jiji Bezananji, Drula Benji Sanje Jubajo. The one who is transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher Sugata and protector, to you, I make prostrations. The one who is eliminated. So that prayer right there is from Dignaga's Compendium for Valid Cognition. And that one stanza, Dharmakirti was so blown away by that one stanza, you could explain the Buddha's life story. And he saw so much profundity in it that he wrote hundreds of stanzas in the commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition. So this, the one who is transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher Sugata, protector, to you I make prostrations, was written by the great master Dignaga in the 6th century in this Compendium of Valid Cognition. And then the next homage that I will make was written by Dharmakirti in the 7th century in the commentary on Dignaga's text. So both of these prayers are found in the first section of both texts. So Dignaga's text, this is the homage, the one we just read, the one who's transformed into a reliable guide. And in Dharmakirti's text, this is a homage that I'm about to read. So Dharmakirti writes hundreds of stanzas about, this one stanza. And then this is the homage that he pays to Shakyamuni before he gets into it. In the Pramanavartika Karika, we've heard so much about the Dharmakirti's commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition, right? So Dignaga's text is the Pramana Samuchaya, and then Dharmakirti's text is the Pramanavartika Karika. So this is from that. The one who has eliminated the web of conceptualizations and is endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and the profound, who eternally shines forth the forever noble light rays. To you, the Buddha, I make prostrations. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind of full awakening for the benefit of sentient beings. It's so amazing. We have all of this material, right? Just think of if it was even 70 years ago, we wouldn't have just stacks of materials now because of all of these translators and these kind people who were like, I call like Tupten children, like daredevils, right? That just went and did this preposterous thing with this preposterous language, and made all of these incredible books that we now have that we can just understand and look at. It's like a step we can skip because of the kindness of others. And when we speak of dependent origination, look at that kindness, right? And there's one more prayer I'd like to share with you And they read this right before I start class at the Tibet House in New Delhi. And it's kind of like a shake you up. They do a lot of introductory prayers before we start class at Tibet House. And, we start our master's course on October 2nd. And it's going to be 2 or 3 days a week for the next 6 years. So that's a little commitment I made. But it's so wonderful. Geshe Dorje Damdu is a genius. And and now is the time, right? We don't know how much time we have. And if I can be around someone who has a genius way of presenting this material, and it can enhance my ability to move quicker towards Buddhahood, then I'm all for it. And I've just noticed that they're always changing up the beginning prayers during classes. Sometimes they read this sutra, sometimes they read that sutra. And we've gotten such an overview of so many different sutras as a result of it, and seen kind of how the framework goes together in such a beautiful way, with even more frames of reference, saying like, yeah, it's right here in this sutra. This is where that comes from. So before class, there's just a short thing. It's called Instructions on Parting from the Four Attachments. And it was written by a great Sakya master about maybe 100 years before Sakya Pandita. And he had a vision. He was this really completely realized kind of like tulku, like reincarnate, right? Person. And his name was Sachen Kunganimpo, just to be very specific. I thought that, but I wanted to just double check. So Sachen Kunganimpo. So when he's 12, he has a vision of Manjushri. And Manjushri comes and gives him instructions, which are then now known as instructions on parting from the four attachments. And I think it's just such a beautiful way to look at the path and kind of we talk about the mirror of the Dharma, whether or not we're actually practicing or not. And this is our mirror, and I love it. So it says, if you are attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interests, you have no bodhicitta. If you have grasping, you don't have the view. And it's just so amazing how you can see the abandonment of the things of this life, the abandonment of samsara, bodhicitta and emptiness. That's the entire path. Just so beautiful. So tonight we're here to talk about bodhicitta. Anyone who is joining on Instagram, it's probably going to shut off in a couple minutes. I'll try to lean over and restart it. But if it didn't work last time, so if you go on Facebook to Tara Mantra, you'll find the rest of the class. We're live on that. And you can just click on the Zoom link on our buddhistcenter.com, and you can be right on the screen in front of me in like 3 seconds. I don't care if you come on late or early, whatever. It's fine. Just come on. So if you get kicked off Instagram, wait a minute, it may come back up live, but if it doesn't, then you can find it on other places. So tonight we're talking about bodhicitta, this incredible mind that we talked a little bit about in the guided meditation. It comes from renunciation. And one interesting point that I was, kind of honing in on the Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment today, and looking at a bunch of different commentaries. And I found some kind of interesting things that I'd like to share with you tonight. But let's look at the outline of Panchen Sanandrapa's text and kind of get to where we are, and then I'll get into my points that I got into with Geshe Aga and found in the Lamrim Chemo this morning. And it's just always enhancing, right, our understanding of bodhicitta. I mean, I've been studying this 25 years, bodhicitta, 27 years. And this morning I'm reading the Lamrim Chemo, like, wow, they must have written that last night in there. Never saw that before. Somebody added to my Lamrim Chemo last night. So it's amazing, right? I'm looking at the bodhicitta with a magnifying glass, and there's been this book I've read 1 billion times that I just obviously didn't see without the magnifying glass on. So that's how this works, though. That's how our mind proliferates. That's how we know we're not there yet, because our mind just keeps getting cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. Because as the Buddha said, our mind's in the nature of clear light, not sullied or stained, right? But right now it happens to be. It's like this gold that we have that's mixed with all this dirt, and we just have to polish it, and then we can find that gold again, right? We can find that preciousness that we have that can be made into anything. So we're looking at this outline of the text, Panchen Sonandrapa's text. We see first we start with the basis. What kind of basis, physical basis, mental basis do you need to get aspiring bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta? So leave it at that. And then next we got into causes. What are general causes you're going to need, and what are specific causes you are going to need to get bodhicitta, right? And so forth. So we've gotten through that section on generals and specifics in a way that I feel is good. I'm happy with it. So now we move on to the next section, which is called nature. And nature is kind of like definition, like, how do you define this kind of mind that aspires to enlightenment? What are, how do we know what it is? So this is where I kind of started today, this morning, with phone calls and books and stuff. So what is the nature of it? So when we look at the definition of the mind that aspires to enlightenment, which is the all accepted definition, it's from the Abhisama Alamkara, Maitreya's ornament for clear realization. This is the main, and the ornament for, so we're looking at Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection, right? That is a commentary on Maitreya's Abhisama Alamkara, ornament for clear realization. So this quote, which everyone agrees is the definition of bodhicitta, in a very condensed way, is from Maitreya's ornament for clear realization, the Abhisama Alamkara, which Panchen Sonandrapa's commentary is written about. Okay, so the source text is where we're getting this definition from. And it says the definition is the development of the spirit of enlightenment is, it says, the desire for perfect enlightenment for others' welfare, for the sake of others, for the benefit of others, for others' needs. You can translate it a lot of different ways. So that's the definition of this. And it's really interesting. Not only are there these stages leading up where you get renunciation, and it turns into this bodhicitta eventually, right, through these various processes of meditation. But Lama Tsongkhapa makes a really, really important point. He says that there's 2 points that are being made here. There's the desire, 2 intentions here. Is the intention to attain enlightenment, and that's for you. It's within that. So when we talk about this idea of fulfilling all of your needs and others' needs, you aren't forgetting that part. So your renunciation doesn't just become like thrown out the window. You still, day and night, want to emerge from cyclic existence. You just have a higher aim. So now you're like, okay, the hearers and solitary realizers, freedom from cyclic existence, very interesting progression, Lama Tsongkhapa says. I've never caught on to completely. I mean, it's kind of like you get it when you read it, but think about it. So you go through this progression. Now you have renunciation. You have a desire to get out of cyclic existence for yourself. This individual liberation vehicle we find in the hearer and solitary realizer. You can call it Hinayana, you can call it Theravada, you can call it the individual liberation vehicle. We're calling it a lot of things, or the Pali tradition. We're calling it a lot of things. But those particular teachings only lead to an abiding nirvana. So the practitioner, before getting into everybody else, recognizes that their needs aren't fulfilled in a complete way in the hearer and solitary realizer vehicle. So the practitioner from the renunciation is saying, wow, this is incomplete. What I'm aiming at, I'm saying, I just want this, and I'm not thinking right because there's so much more. I can have infinite happiness. I can be a Buddha. They're only hearers and solitary realizers. They're in nirvana. They aren't Buddhas. I'm not complete unless I'm a Buddha. So it starts with almost like a selfish intention I never saw before in this kind of bodhicitta section, where you're saying like, okay, I have renunciation. That renunciation's not good enough. I need to want to renounce the obstructions to omniscience too. So it's very interesting because I don't fulfill all of my own needs if I have obstructions to omniscience. So that desire for your own highest perfection has to be in this idea of the mind that aspires to enlightenment. It starts there. And other texts say that, oh, the mind that aspires to enlightenment is just wanting to be a Buddha because you see all of the excellent qualities a Buddha has. And Lama Tsongkhapa says that that's short-sighted, but necessary. Lama Tsongkhapa says that isn't the definition of bodhicitta. Others have gotten it wrong, but you have to have that in there because you have to want to fulfill your needs and all other beings' needs, because you just decided that when you got renunciation. You decided you wanted to get rid of the afflictive obstructions. You don't decide now you don't want to. And that's why you see later on, when they're abandoning misconceptions about the bodhisattva, Lama Tsongkhapa negates the idea that the bodhisattva doesn't have the highest level of renunciation. So later on in the text, there are these, from the Here a Solitary Realizer Committee, saying, oh, bodhisattvas like cyclic existence because they keep throwing themselves back in again and again and again. And Lama Tsongkhapa says, oh, you just haven't read enough texts. You don't know. You have an incomplete understanding. The bodhisattva has the highest level of renunciation because he or she now looks at suffering in this infinite way and wants to emerge, and now infinitely not only needs to get out for themselves, but now sees all this other mess that they have to like become a Buddha to fix. So now not only are you like motivated to get out of cyclic existence to fix your mess, now there's all this other mess around you that you have nothing but day and night in your mind but to fix. And that's what's beautiful about this mind that aspires to enlightenment. So in this section on bodhicitta and Panchen Sanandrapa's general meaning of perfection, so many points are made about this. And Panchen Sanandrapa extends the definition, and he calls it Mahayana mind generation. It defines it. It's bodhicitta explained, as Aga said, in a, if you were going to define it and add some more, ornaments to the definition, that's what Panchen Sanandrapa did. So in the text, it goes through this back and forth of, how do you really define this mind that aspires to enlightenment? Is it a mind? Is it a mental factor? And they establish that it's actually a main mind, that this is an actual state of mind that day and night you will have. And that's why they say the bodhisattvas, even when they're distracted, are generating virtue, are gaining the goal, are getting closer to the goal of Buddhahood in every single thing that they do, because every action has this mind. It's a main mind where its state is wanting to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings day and night. Just like renunciation and the three principal paths by Lama Tsongkhapa is defined as day and night, seeking liberation, wanting to get out of cyclic existence. That mind now is a mind that day and night wants to get out of cyclic existence and wants to become a Buddha and wants to do it for the sake of sentient beings. So this is a main mind now that just occurs at all times like that. And the bodhisattva generally doesn't lose that main mind. And once they move to the second level and they take the bodhisattva vows and so forth, they never lose it. It's always there no matter what. And it's supported by this intentions. It's supported by other mental factors, right? But it's a main mind that then has accompanying mental factors around it, as opposed to being a mental factor that accompanies a main mind. So it's very important to understand this about bodhicitta, according to Panchen Sanandrapa, that it's this kind of pervasive mind. It's in your mind at all times. Even when you have ultimate bodhicitta, which we'll get into, very difficult, it's actually it's while a bodhisattva is directly perceiving emptiness, and they aren't perceiving the mind that aspires to enlightenment at that point. They're only perceiving emptiness, but it's there. Just like when you're sleeping, you're not blind. The bodhisattva is seeing emptiness, they're still a bodhisattva because they have bodhicitta. If they didn't have bodhicitta, they'd see emptiness and they'd temporarily not be a bodhisattva if there wasn't the bodhicitta there while they were directly perceiving emptiness. So that's why we call it ultimate bodhicitta. It's a bodhisattva directly perceiving emptiness, but it's not bodhicitta, because bodhicitta is a mind which is impermanent and is not something that the object is not an object of observation of the wisdom realizing emptiness. It's just possessed by that mind at the point, almost in a state of dormancy. Not dormancy, it's just there. So during the perception of emptiness, there's just the perception of the emptiness of objective existence. And there isn't a thinking of others at that moment, but they're still a bodhisattva. And as soon as they come out of the direct perception of emptiness, back to conventional reality, back to, the conventional, out of that direct perception of emptiness of the ultimate truth, and then begin to perceive conventional reality again, then the mind is immediately, after this path of release, and they come out of seeing emptiness directly, you've seen emptiness directly, and now I'm working for the sake of sentient beings. So the mind can't perceive those two things simultaneously. Very complicated topic, debated day and night in Drepung, but why not drop it in the water and see what you guys can come up with, So ultimate bodhicitta is not bodhicitta. Why is it not bodhicitta? Because the direct perception of emptiness is all that's occurring on the path of seeing, or during these paths of meditation, when one is seeing emptiness. When a bodhisattva sees emptiness, they're only seeing emptiness. Their mind isn't cognitively, there's no conceptuality, that is saying, that has this kind of love and compassion, this desire that's just saturating it, that is thinking about those things, or that is motivated by those things at that moment. But there's still this bodhisattva directly perceiving emptiness. So their bodhicitta is ultimate bodhicitta at that point. That's later. It's only a few seconds later in the text. So but I just brought it up. But we'll get into more about that one later on. Okay, so what does Panchen Sonandrapa say is the definition? He says, great vehicle mind generation, the Teichen Senche, or Mahayana mind generation, is a consciousness or a main consciousness, which is the entrance to the great vehicle. So he puts that in there to make sure everybody knows that the bodhicitta is the door to the Mahayana. It's the door into the Mahayana, which has arisen in association with a wish, which is its own aid. It aids its arisal, that aims at perfect enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So Panchen Sonandrapa just adds a few things to let you know it's a main mind, and that it's the door to the Mahayana. And now he's going to, after this, get into what are the divisions of these entrances. What are the divisions of door? What does that mean? It's an entrance, and so forth. So we probably won't get into those tonight, because third category is real short. We went through the meat and potatoes of the causes section, and this section's quite short. It just goes to prove to you basically that Shanti, that you can define it in this way, according to the Abhisama Alamkara, which is just the wish for enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And then you say, is it a mind or a mental factor? Is it a main mind? Goes through this in the text, and then it establishes that it's a mind. And then Panchen Sonandrapa gives this definition, that it's a main mind, that's the door to the Mahayana. It's this, this kind of, it's associated with a wish, this wish to do it, turns it into it, right? This kind of intention, this wish to become a Buddha turns it into this mind that always day and night is seeking this Buddhahood for the sake of sentient beings. So that bodhisattva, while they're seeing emptiness, is still seeking Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. They're just not thinking about it. But they're made that's when they get out of that direct perception, right? Because there's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch. There's no thinking about love, no thinking about compassion when you're directly perceiving emptiness. So that's the point. That's the subtlety. This is the precision that we're looking for when we talk about this stuff. We're not looking for like a little bit of a wishy-washy understanding. We're looking for precision. We're looking for, how does one become a bodhisattva? Because I don't want insufficient results. How does that happen? And what do I do while I'm a bodhisattva? That's what Panchen Sonandrapa is talking about. How do I become one? And what do I do while I'm one? Without error. And it's so beautiful that we have a text that can show us without error and just kind of guide us through all of this. And we have to do it this way. Aga and I were talking about, like, there's some concepts out there that I'm already a Buddha, right? I'm already enlightened. That's what Buddha nature means. It's a very big concept that's out there right now because, the Buddha said the mind's the nature of clear light, right? And the clear light, is this purity. So there's this idea that we're pure, right? But there's a misinterpret, because the mind right now isn't pure. Its nature may be, but it's right now kind of like, the pure water that ran off the Himalaya and then somehow ends up in the Ganges. I wouldn't drink the Ganges water. I wouldn't have a big cup of that. But if you went up to the Himalaya it came from, you could probably get a nice cup of pure water, right? So if you think you're a Buddha, go drink the Ganges water. You'll find out real quick how cause and effect works, right? And how purification works. And this is an example that Dorje Damdu gives about, he talks about, he asks people, what's the dirtiest river where you live? He makes someone name it, and he's like, would you drink it? No, of course not. And do you think, think it, at its root, it's that, anyway. So it's just a good way to think about how we can mature. And Geshe Aga was saying this morning that when we don't know something, we don't have, we don't cherish others because we don't know how to cherish others. We don't know we need to cherish others. So we have a state of unknowing how to do something. The only way you can fix unknowing is with knowing. The only way you can know is by having information to know in order to change unknowing to knowing. Geshe La this morning said, we originally, and Rinpoche gave this example so many times, had the ignorance related to the alphabet. Then someone taught us the alphabet, and now we no longer have the ignorance related to the alphabet. That ignorance has been abandoned. That state of ignorance related to that specific phenomena has been abandoned because we now know the alphabet. But we don't know these steps that make us into bodhisattvas. We don't know the nature of reality. We don't understand it. We've gotten it wrong over and over again. So it's necessary for us to take the state of unknowing and turn it into knowing. And wisdom, which is the opposite of ignorance, right, is the only way that we can transform unknowing ignorance into knowing. So Aga said there's no way around it. We have to know these things, and then we have to analyze these things. The wisdom arisen from hearing, and then the wisdom arisen from meditation, from analysis, and then the wisdom arisen from meditation has to happen in that order. And we don't need to look at like magical, mystical words to figure that out. We know that in order to know the alphabet, we had to learn it and then see, okay, this is how the letters go. It's in this order, A, B, and that's Z. That's the first letter, that's the last letter. And we got it together, and then it was there, right? And then the ignorance related to the alphabet was gone. Now from this class, maybe we didn't know all the steps for equalizing and exchanging self with others. Maybe we didn't really know how the 7-point cause and effect work. Maybe we didn't understand the basis we needed. Very interesting. We studied in the first classes the basis that was needed mentally for getting the mind that aspires to enlightenment is having faith that observes the conqueror. Then you read in Lama Tsongkhapa's text that you have to start with this faith that says the Buddha is so great. That says, oh, I want to be this being because they're better than a hearer and solitary realizer. So you see how this mental condition has to be there, and how Panchen Sonandrapa is just running behind Lama Tsongkhapa and just putting in some things and just making more jewels on this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful piece of work called the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment. All these great pandits and the textbook writers, you always just find, Lama Tsongkhapa in there, just hiding out, hiding out in plain sight. And it's only because Lama Tsongkhapa just gave us this pure, stainless Dharma that we could interpret something that the Buddha was so worried no one could ever understand, or just portrayed this worry that no one could ever understand it. It took him, he becomes enlightened under the Bodhi tree, and he doesn't start teaching after he sees emptiness, realizes how to end suffering, based on the traditional tale or the traditional story. And then finally Indra and Brahma show up with like a conch and a wheel, and they're like, please blow the truth of the Dharma to the world. And they hand him a conch and they hand him a wheel and say, please turn the wheel of Dharma. And the first thing the Buddha says is he looks at them and says, profound, peaceful, elaboration-free, clear light, and non-composite. Such is the Dharma, nectar-like, I've discovered. Finding no one who can fathom this teaching in silence, I'm going to retire to the woods. So he sees how profound this Dharma is, and how it's free of elaboration, it's ultimate truth and clear light. And how could anyone understand this without reaching its substantiality and reaching its nihilism, right? How would anyone be able to see this middle way? And how would anybody be able to understand this non-composite feature of cessation, meaning that it's permanent? The Buddha first stated that all composite things are impermanent. All contaminated things are suffering. So the Buddha said that this moving so fast thing, well, I've reached a state of cessation, and guess what? It's not moving. It's not moving. It's non-composite. And we have to understand these words. The Buddha's first thing, the four, right? The four seals that seal the Buddha's teachings. All composite things are impermanent. All contaminated things are suffering. All phenomena are selfless and empty. Nirvana is peace. We see it, how all of these things interact. All composite things are impermanent. Cessation isn't composite. Cessation is not impermanent. Cessation is permanent. Right? Emptiness is not composite. Emptiness is permanent. And we start to be able to differentiate phenomena and understand how we categorize these things, and how a cessation of suffering can be permanent. How a removal of a cause makes a result not occur. It's impossible for it to occur. A karma not created can't create a result. You remove the origin, you remove the potential, you have something non-composite. You have a cessation that's not compound. It can't move. It's not moving like this. It's not moving 65 moments a second. You know, the being abiding in it that's thinking, that has omniscience in the Dharmakaya, sure, that's moving 65 moments a second. But their state of cessation is not moving 65 seconds. It's permanently over. There's just an absence of suffering. It's a negative state, right? It's a negative, it's an absence of, it's a non-existence of suffering. It can't go. Non-existent things don't do this. Right? Only things that are momentary, only things that are temporal, like sequent, you know, that can actually move like this. There's a non-existent thing. There's nothing to move. There's no, you know, not any form, right, to change. There's not any consciousness that's changing momentarily, and there's not any non-associated compositional factors. You know, there's not a person or non-person that isn't either consciousness or form that's changing. And all impermanent phenomena fall into the category of form, consciousness, or not non-associated compositional factors. So every bit of impermanent phenomena falls into that. Cessation doesn't fall into any of that. It's permanent. Because it's an absence, it's a concept, it's an imputedly existent situation. This cessation is. So yeah, so that's where we'll end tonight. There's a lot more to talk about in the future, but I appreciate you all hanging in there. You know, I other places on the app platforms, Terry and I were talking, you know, I'm giving these little sound bites. And it's so hard to taste the Dharma in little bits and pieces. We really can't be satisfied with partial instructions. Kensler Geshe Wandak never gave partial instructions. He sometimes explained words for a class, you know, and the way that the being was that we watched live, and I watched, you know, we watched slowly pass away, had the same affect in all the situations. Happy 25 years ago, happy the day before I never saw him again. And that was created by never being satisfied with partial instructions. I see it so clearly as days go by and as this stuff saturates more and more and more. Geshe Dorje Damdu is like, gave me some key to Rinpoche's teachings or blessing. I have no idea, but it's just like, it's just all just so beautiful and hair-raising at this point. I can see how you could get renunciation. I see how bodhicitta is real. I see beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can see emptiness. I haven't seen emptiness. I don't have an inferential valid cognition of emptiness, but I can see through all of this analysis that ultimate truth isn't negatable. I can see that there doesn't seem to be anything to be able to hit the 20 emptinesses. There's nothing that can seem to, penetrate that when we look at it from the middle way consequence school. And if you don't know why things aren't inherently arisen from self, other, a combination or both, or causelessly, the way that Nagarjuna presents it, if we can't come up with what the object of negation is, and then if we can't see that that object, an inherently existent self, isn't arisen from itself, isn't arisen from something else, isn't arisen from itself and something else, isn't arisen causelessly, if we can't explain that point, that stanza that Arya Nagarjuna makes, we don't have the view. If we still have grasping, as that great Sakya Lama said, we don't have the view. So we can't be satisfied. And if we can't in our minds, if we can't just in a room full of 1 million people confidently explain the Madhyamika view, we don't have it. Albert Einstein would never be scared to explain some sort of physics, right? He'd walk into a room with anybody there and explain it with confidence because he knew it. If we can't do that, we don't know emptiness inferentially. And in Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way, he's so clear that, we're usually fettered by kind of conceptual thoughts, and the yogis dwell in non-discursive thought. But it's through inference and understanding of reality first conceptually that we can non-conceptually realize it. So if we can't conceptually pick reality apart into 1 million pieces in 1 million different ways and be certain of it, we don't have the view. And at the time of death, we will have attachment because that grasping will create it. And it's so important that we hone this down. We should know what these forms of emptiness are. If we look at the 20 emptinesses that Chandrakirti presents, that Lama Tsongkhapa was able to see, after in the sky, after really realizing emptiness, he saw in Sanskrit syllables these 20 emptinesses. If we can't look at those 20 emptinesses and see the lack of objective existence and the subjective conventional existence and the ultimate lack of even subjective existence, if we can't see that within that reality, if we can't see, how there could be, this subjective clear light, this most subtle point of our mind, and the objective clear light, which is the lack of true establishment of phenomena, if we can't see how this subtle mind that doesn't grasp could comprehend this lack of objective existence, and if we don't understand what the object of negation is, the objectively existent phenomena, if we can't see that things conventionally only exist subjectively, we'll never be able to then have this object of observation of our subtlest mind be emptiness, right? Like, when we look at what the all phenomenon's objective existence is, it's emptiness of objectivity. So so it's conventional subjective existence. And if we can't work our way through all of that, we don't understand how cognitively these causes and conditions come together, and we see wholes become are just collections of parts, and that through some power, through some collective engager that takes place through our consciousness, we're bringing all this information in, and then our mental consciousness is using an image and eliminating everything that we think isn't that, and then naming it and bringing that thing into the power, bringing it into existence through the power of a name. If we can't see how at the most subtle drop of our most subtle level of consciousness, all things dependently originate from subjectively, if you can't just rip through that and explain it, you don't have the view. If you don't have the view, you will be reborn in cyclic existence again and again and again and again and again. So play around. Don't take it seriously. Think you don't have to study. Think there's some other powered nature that I'm hearing about now, that you can do a mantra and some other powered nature blesses you from outer space. Or you can just read a line and the words will bless you from outer space. Maybe Milarepa, a word will bless from outer space, but maybe not somebody like me, not the norm. We don't hear 1 million stories. We got a couple Milarepas, right? We don't have millions of stories about beings who can, from a couple words realize the whole Dharma. We are not those kind of, I'm not that kind of being, right? I can only speak from my own side. You know, Dharmakirti says we can only judge our own minds. And who said that? The Buddha said in a sutra. He said, be careful. Everyone around you could be a Buddha. You have no idea. You only know your own mind. Your own mind is a mess. So don't judge others. You know, don't throw stones at others who have a, you know, probably cleaner mind than you do, because you don't even know their mind. You can only know your mind. Look in the mirror of the Dharma and know what your mind should be, see how it's sitting right now and fix it. So how we fix it is through wisdom and through analysis. It's not through hoping or something that feels good or music. Let's throw some music in there. All that is clinging to cyclic existence. And like it says right in this text, and I'm going to read it one more time right before we end. I'm going to start and end every class with this because I feel it's so powerful. You know, if you are, and this is from the great Sakya Lama, who wrote this after meeting Manjushri. And Manjushri said to Sakya Kunga Nimpo, I believe. Let's double check that. It's only the second time we've never quoted who the person was, but I don't like quoting in class. But I looked it up because I didn't like that. So Sachen Kunga Nimpo says, and now let's look at these things. This is the mirror of the Dharma, everyone. We just had a Dharma class. Let's be honest with ourselves. You know, let's be honest. Here's the mirror of the Dharma right now. If you are attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. Are you here tonight to feel better about this life? Are you doing your Dharma practice to try to make things just go a little bit easier in this life? Because according to this Sakya Lama, who's even 100 years before Sakya Pandita, it says, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. So are you? Are you a spiritual practitioner? If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. Are you attached in some way to the higher realms? In your next life, are you hoping, oh, I really, really hope I can be rich. I hope in my next life I get a little bit better time than this one, at least. Are you attached to your next life? Are you attached to samsara? Are you attached to this idea of, oh, in my next life, maybe I'll just go to a pure land, right? I'll just be in that pure land. Are you attached to your next life? Because if you are, you don't have renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. Are you self-centered still? Do you cherish yourself more than others? Is your first, oh, well, what about me? You know, do you have bodhicitta? Do you day and night think about, first of all, getting out of cyclic existence? And then secondly, doing it in a way to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And if there's grasping, you don't have the view. Can you look at the 20 emptinesses and explain them clearly? Do you know the most subtle level of that kind of most subtle mind that doesn't grasp, and the most subtle kind of nature of all phenomena, you know, the outer and inner clear light? Can you explain that? Do you know that? I don't, in a complete way. So those are the questions we ask ourselves as spiritual practitioners. And with that, let's read about Rinpoche's mind in the 8 verses for training the mind. I always like to say that, you know, anyone who didn't get to meet Khenser Geshe Wandak, think about Bodhicitta, and that's what his mind was. As Atisha said, you know, if you're sad you didn't meet me, don't worry, get Bodhicitta and you'll know my mind. And this is just a little glimpse into the mind of a great being, and how we should all conduct our minds, and will conduct our minds when we're bodhisattvas and then Buddhas. 8 verses on training the mind by Geshe Langri Tamba. With a determination to accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely dear. Whenever I associate with others, I will learn to think of myself as the lowest amongst all, respectfully hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart. In all actions, I will learn to search into my mind, and as soon as a disturbing emotion arises, endangering myself and others, I will firmly face and avert it. I will learn to cherish ill-natured beings and those oppressed by strong misdeeds and sufferings as if I had found a precious treasure difficult to find. When others out of jealousy treat me badly with abuse, slander, and so on, I will learn to take all loss and offer victory to them. When the one whom I benefited with great hope unreasonably hurts me very badly, I will learn to view that person as an excellent spiritual guide. In short, I will learn to offer to everyone without exception all help and happiness directly and indirectly, and respectfully take upon myself all the harm and suffering of my mothers. I will learn to keep all these practices undefiled by the stains of the 8 worldly concerns, and by understanding all phenomena as like illusion, be released from the bondage of attachment. So my desire to help others and put others' needs before my own shouldn't be mixed in with the 8 worldly concerns. And I need to understand that when I'm helping someone else, that I, the helper, the act of helping, and the someone else are empty of inherent existence, are empty of objective existence. Their objective existence is the emptiness of objectivity. So the action, agent, and the object are all empty of true establishment because they dependently originate. Our clear light mind is empty of true establishment because it dependently originates. Emptiness is empty of true establishment because it dependently originates. So we have to really, really understand this and seal all of our virtues with this understanding of dependent origination and of emptiness. So with that in mind, we'll do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Just give me a second. Get a lot of stuff out. The fundamental ground is centered with, and again, imagine all the gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas in the space in front of you. Imagine all sentient beings are giving this Thanksgiving mandala offering with you. And this really connects us to every single sentient being. We'll have to know them all if we want to be Buddha. So just imagine they're all here with us now, so we can know more and more of them as we become more virtuous from a mind state. Because it's only the virtuous mind that increases more and more that will allow us to be able to see more and more beings to love. So let's do this mandala offering. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure land. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. Long life prayer for His Holiness in Tibetan. Ngang ri ra we gor we jin jan de en dan de wa ma lu jong we ne jen re zi wang Tenzin Gyatso Jabe Zide Padu Denyo. I pray that we may in all our lives never be separated from Khenso Geshe Wandak. May we meet him or her in the emanation body when we're ordinary beings. May we meet him or her in the enjoyment body when we're Arya Bodhisattvas. And when we become a Buddha, may we always help Khenso Geshe Wandak and all of our gurus lead all sentient beings to a state of enlightenment, which is free of suffering and is a state of infinite bliss. Thank you so much, everyone. Just so wonderful. I rejoice in all the good that these holy beings have done, all of the yogis that have sat in caves to be able to realize this clear light mind, all these incredible scholars that have written all these great texts in the profound view lineage, the extensive deeds lineage, and the lineage of blessings from Tilo and Naro. I just feel so grateful and just showered with just love whenever we talk about this stuff by all those holy beings, because they've just given us such nectar to drink, right? So thank you. Keep drinking the nectar of truth. And I'll see you all on Sunday, where we're talking about Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. And we see how these two, Thursday and Sunday night really enhance one another and really work together well. And I just want to say thank you. Have a wonderful night. See y'all later.
Thank you, Jeff.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everybody on Facebook and so forth. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful night.